The sheriff's knock landed on my front door like a gravestone dropping. I'd just finished folding Mama's funeral shawl when his voice called my name, formal, distant, through the screen. In that moment, I knew something worse than grief had arrived. He held an eviction notice with my sister Evelyn's signature stamped across the bottom. "I'm sorry, Miss Delaney," he murmured, stepping aside as two movers pushed past him and into the hallway I'd mopped that very morning. Mama's antique mirror flashed my stunned reflection. 68, sweat slick, still wearing black. The movers didn't slow to read the room. Evelyn had convinced me a month earlier to speed up probate. She'd slid a neat stack of documents across Mama's lace tablecloth, promising it would save me headaches. I trusted her, signed quick, and poured another 2 cups of chicory coffee. Turns out those papers gifted the house to an LLC Evelyn registered one day after the burial, leaving me with nothing but the Buick in the driveway and a box of sympathy cards. By nightfall, rain hammered the car roof as I tried to sleep in the driver's seat, the scent of mildew climbing through the air vents. My phone glowed on the console. For hours I hesitated. Pride can be louder than thunder. But just after midnight, I thumbed through old contacts and pressed Calvin Booker. He answered halfway through the first ring. "Loretta May?" His voice, still baritone smooth, cracked under sleep. Calvin had been Savannah PD's sharpest detective before bad politics shoved him into early retirement. We'd dated briefly in high school. Since then, Christmas cards were our only proof of history. I swallowed shame and talked until dawn about Evelyn's forged deed, about my children Naomi and Jackson accepting tuition payoffs from their aunt, about the movers who boxed Mama's wedding china as if it were yard sale glass. Cal listened, then said 8 words that felt like a fresh pane of glass sliding into a broken frame. "Pack what you need. I'm on my way." He showed by sunrise in a powder blue Crown Vic, beard peppered silver, eyes clear and hard. First he took me for breakfast, eggs and strong coffee at a diner thick with trucker chatter, then drove straight to Zelma Hightower, an attorney who'd once prosecuted racketeers for the state. Cal's name still opened doors. Zelma squeezed me in between depositions. She scanned the forged quitclaim deed, lips tightening. "Your signature slopes left," she said, tapping the document. "Here it slopes right. Amateur." Within an hour, Zelma drafted a petition to freeze Evelyn's accounts and a civil suit for fraudulent conveyance. Cal stood by the window, already piecing together timelines. The LLC registration, the notary stamp, the tuition wires to my kids' banks. His detective instincts crackled like static. "Your sister's fingerprints are everywhere," he said, "but legal motions don't open locked doors at midnight." Housing was next. Cal knew a traveling nurse renting her bungalow to cover a 6-month posting in Oregon. By the afternoon, I had a key under a clay frog, a roof over my head, and the first deep breath since Mama's heart stopped. That evening, Naomi showed up, mascara smudged from a 3-hour cry drive. "Mama, Aunt Ev said you wanted assisted living. She gave us the deed, said you'd signed it willingly." I pulled out Zelma's forensic analysis, forgery blown up to poster size. Naomi's face crumpled. She admitted Evelyn had wired $50,000 to clear her mortgage. I didn't scold. I handed her a choice. Keep the money and stay silent, or testify and face the debt again, but keep your name clean. Silence tasted bitter. Finally, she whispered, "I'll testify." Before leaving, she hinted at something darker involving my son Jackson, unsaid, suspended like humidity before a storm. I spent that night on the bungalow's porch, rain tapping rhythms on the tin roof. Cal sat beside me, a manila folder balanced on his knee, evidence growing thicker by the hour. "Tomorrow," he said, flipping the folder shut, We serve Evelyn with an injunction, subpoena the notary, and pull banking logs. The sheriff will photograph every piece. I looked across the wet street, imagining Mama's gardenias back at the Victorian, roots still in my soil, even if papers said otherwise. Betrayal had torn me from that porch, but justice had wheels and a retired detective's badge. And as dawn bleached the night sky, I realized my sister hadn't just stolen a house. She'd given me a mission, one I intended to finish. Evelyn didn't expect a camera flash when she opened her front door at 11:07 a.m. She certainly didn't expect the deputy to step aside so Calvin could snap a second shot. Her shocked face frozen beside the manila envelope stamped temporary restraining order. She recovered fast, always did, pulling a silk robe tighter and forcing a dimpled smile. "Brother Booker playing paparazzi now," she purred. Cal ignored the bait. "Documenting service, judge's orders." The deputy handed her the papers. She skimmed, jaw tightening when she reached the asset freeze clause. "Loretta's really gone dramatic," she said, eyes flicking over my shoulder to the rental sedan idling at the curb. "Dragging old sweethearts out of retirement. How quaint." I stepped forward, voice steady. "Forgery isn't quaint." Evelyn's gaze slid to my face, searching for the sister who once hid with her under quilt forts during summer storms. She didn't find her. Cal signaled we were done, but Evelyn planted herself in the doorway. "You won't win," she hissed, politeness stripped. "Mama owed me. I paid her bills while you played nurse with quilts and cobblers." I swallowed a surge of memories. Hospital visits she skipped, utility checks she mailed late on purpose, and turned away. No courtroom needed more testimony. Her words spoke enough. Back in the sedan, Cal laid the camera on the console. "Sheriff's timestamp and photo solid service," he said. "Phase 2, notary interview." He merged into traffic, asphalt shimmering under July sun. The strip mall tax office looked faded in daylight. Miss Terry McLean, the notary, waited behind a cluttered desk, eyes swollen from a sleepless night since Cal's first visit. Zelma had sent her a subpoena an hour earlier. Fear had done its work. Terry produced her journal. The page dated the day of Mama's funeral was missing. "Evelyn tore it out," she confessed, voice shaking. "Said Ms. Delaney wanted privacy." Cal clicked his recorder. "You watched her remove it?" Terry nodded, tears pooling. "She gave me $2,000 in cash and said you were bedridden, couldn't come in." Her confession sealed Evelyn's forged paperwork deeper than any wax stamp. We left with the journal gap documented and an affidavit signed. Zelma would have a field day. Lunch was drive-through barbecue eaten in the car, sticky sauce staining manila envelopes. Cal reviewed our checklist. Next stop, Jackson. My stomach lurched. Naomi's cryptic warning echoed something about Jackson. My son, my golden boy engineer living 3 counties north, always too busy to visit. His townhouse sat in a cul-de-sac of manicured lawns. He opened the door wearing a golf polo and gilt. "Mom." "Hey." Eyes darted to Cal's badge, then to the evidence folder. "I figured you'd come." Inside, trophies from high school science fairs lined shelves, but moving boxes stacked in corners hinted at big changes. Over untouched iced tea, Jackson unfolded his piece of the betrayal. Evelyn had offered to bankroll his startup, Smart Home Software, if he signed as witness and filed grant paperwork using the Victorian as collateral. "She called it a bridge loan," he muttered. "Said you'd approve once profits rolled in." Cal laid out the forged deed copy. "Bridge built on stolen boards collapses." Jackson's shoulders sagged. "I know. Profits didn't roll. Her LLC now owns 41% of my company. She pushed to sell before Mom found out." Regret cracked his voice. I stayed quiet. I inhaled slowly, memories fluttering, teaching him to whittle toy boats, watching him ace calculus, believing integrity ran deeper than ambition. Silence helped her steal, I said, not unkind but unvarnished. He nodded, shame flushing cheeks. Cal cut in. You still have email threads? Jackson opened a laptop, pulled up messages. Evelyn coaching him on notarizing forms, promising family assets are fluid. Cal copied everything onto a flash drive. You'll forward originals to Attorney Hightower and prepare an apology affidavit, he instructed. Jackson agreed, tears sliding unchecked. Mom, I can't undo it, but I can testify, he said. I reached across the table, covering his hand. Testimony is the first plank in rebuilding trust. My voice trembled, yet resolve held. Back at the bungalow, dusk-painted walls rosy, cigar-shaped cicadas tuned their twilight orchestra. Zelma called voice electric. Terry's confession and our service photo gave her grounds to petition for immediate injunction on the house sale. Court hearing set for Friday. Cal leaned against the porch rail, flipping through notes. We've got the notary, the witness emails, and both kids flipping. He paused, then smiled. Now we shake the real tree. Evelyn's LLC banking records. I felt exhaustion press behind my eyes, but determination pressed harder. Tomorrow we visit Mama's pastor, I said. Evelyn funneled donation checks through him. Paper trail runs through the choir loft. Cal chuckled. Never thought I'd interrogate a hymn book. The laugh faded into a comfortable quiet. Fireflies dotted the yard, blinking like tiny verdict lights. Before bed, I opened a fresh notebook page. Victory requires daylight. Beneath it, I listed names now willing to stand beside me in court. 2 days ago, that column was empty. Tonight it held 3, the beginning of a chorus strong enough to drown one sister's greed. In the silence that followed, I could almost hear Mama's garden gate creak in the breeze as if granting me permission to reclaim what was never lost, only waylaid. I never imagined my mother's hymn book would squeal like a witness on the stand, but the moment Reverend Polk cracked its spine, a personal check fluttered out and landed face down on the church office carpet. The date, 3 days after Mama's funeral, was still crisp. The pay-to-line read, Dawnlight Charitable Holdings, LLC. That was Evelyn's shell company, the same one now sitting on my house deed like a squatter's trailer. Reverend Polk paled beneath his salt and pepper mustache. Sister Evelyn said it was a building fund donation, he murmured, lifting more envelopes, each with Mama's handwriting on the memo line but endorsed by Evelyn. Cal flipped through them, phone camera clicking. Building fund never reached the bank, he said. These were washed into a personal account. The Reverend's shoulders sagged. I'll testify, he said, voice shaky but firm. That made witness 4. I tucked the hymn book back onto the shelf, leaving a small gap where the truth had escaped. Friday's injunction hearing drew half the county courthouse. Church women in Sunday hats, construction workers on early lunch, even the pawn shop clerk who'd refused Evelyn's silver sale. The judge, a sandy-haired woman named McKinnon, glanced over her glasses at the crowd inside. Looks like the Delaney girls brought a choir. Zelma opened with evidence photographs, Terry's torn notary journal, Jackson's email chain, Reverend Polk's checks, that painted Evelyn's scheme in strokes so bold even the back row could follow. Evelyn's attorney objected, but each document sliced objections to ribbons. When Naomi read her affidavit, voice trembling yet steadying with each sentence. Several pew seats away, Evelyn stared at the ceiling as if searching for an escape hatch among the fluorescent panels. Then it was my turn. I took the stand in Mama's pearl earrings. No speech about heartbreak, just the timeline of forged papers, eviction, and the night I slept in my Buick while Evelyn measured curtains for my bedroom. Judge McKinnon's pen paused only once, when I mentioned the missing notary page, and then scribbled twice as fast. Evelyn declined to testify. That silence, heavier than any lie, settled over the courtroom like summer humidity. After closing arguments, Judge McKinnon leaned back. Sale of the Victorian is hereby frozen. Ms. Evelyn Delaney is enjoined from transferring or encumbering any estate asset. Probable cause exists for criminal fraud. Her gavel's thump felt like a heartbeat restarting. As bailiffs escorted Evelyn out for booking, her silk scarf snagged on the door hinge, tearing free with a hiss. She yanked it loose, but the rip stayed visible, trailing after her like a frayed lie. Fresh air hit me outside the courthouse, hot and bright. Cal slipped sunglasses over his tired eyes and handed me a bottle of water. Phase 3, he said, undo the damage. Undoing began with a locksmith. The Victorian's front door swung open to reveal drop cloths, paint cans, and half-installed granite countertops Evelyn must have planned for resale staging. I inhaled plaster dust and something sweeter. Homecoming. On Mama's old dresser sat a dusty frame, the family portrait from 1988, all 3 Delaney sisters in matching Easter hats. The glass was cracked, but the picture survived. I set it upright. That evening, Jackson arrived with a rented truck, returning the rocker, the cameo, every piece he'd helped liquidate. Naomi brought her children, sippy cups clattering in a kitchen that finally echoed with life again. They scrubbed floors, rehung curtains, and kept apologizing until I told them apologies are like nails. The first few hold the board. Hammering beyond that just splits the wood. Cal and I filled box after box with Evelyn's staging materials. He took photographs for Zelma, assets to tally, damages to demand. She'll plea, he predicted, labeling a carton of designer light fixtures. Felony forgery carries 5 years. She'll bargain down if you agree to restitution. I considered that. Forgiveness isn't currency, but justice sometimes spends like one. Restitution and a public apology in church, I said. Mama's congregation deserves the truth. Cal nodded. I'll tell Zelma. We ended the night on the porch swing, cicadas stitching the dark with their steady needle song. A single lamp burned in the upstairs window, my room again. Cal passed me the last page of his notebook. At the top, he'd written, "Case closed markers." Underneath, 4 check marks. Injunction granted, house-secured, criminal charges filed. Family witnesses turned a 5th line weighted blank. "What's left?" I asked. He clicked his pen thoughtfully. "Your choice." I stared at the moonlight silvering Mama's camellia bushes and realized the final checkbox could never be Evelyn's sentence or even restitution. It was something far quieter. Plant new roots in cleared soil. I borrowed Cal's pen and wrote it down. Then I drew the last check mark. Ink dark, line steady. Evelyn's public apology was scheduled for the same sanctuary where Mama once sang alto, and the rumor mill spun faster than the ceiling fans. By that Sunday, pew reservations felt more like theater tickets. Every neighbor eager to see a sister eat crow at the pulpit she'd stepped over to steal an estate. I arrived early, dressed in dove gray linen that matched the morning haze drifting off the river. Stepping through the narthex, I half expected eyes to burn holes in my back, but conversation hushed only long enough for folks to nod hello before resuming their buzz. They weren't gawking at me anymore. The community's spotlight had fully swiveled to Evelyn. Cal stood near the choir loft, shoulders squared under a navy sport coat, clip-on badge dangling from the lapel like a subtle warning that the law was still watching. Jackson and Naomi settled beside me, their kids armed with coloring books instead of hymnals. Small proof everyday life was stitching itself together. The service moved briskly, Reverend Polk clearly wanting the confession over before humidity drowned the organ. After the final hymn, he invited Evelyn forward. She stepped from a side door, hair no longer salon smooth and makeup timid, clutching a single sheet of paper that trembled in her manicured hands. Her voice, when it came, skipped the velvet and went straight to gravel. She admitted forging my signature, lying to her own nieces and nephews, laundering donation checks, even bribing the notary. Gasps rippled like wind through cattails. She finished with a rasped plea for forgiveness and a promise to make full restitution, then placed the paper on the communion table as though it burned her fingers. Silence settled. The apology was complete, but the congregation waited. Maybe for my reaction. Maybe for lightning. I remained seated. The lesson today wasn't about revenge dressed as mercy. It was about truth finally standing without props. That was enough. Reverend Polk dismissed the gathering, and chatter exploded like released steam. Outside, courthouse heat had already settled on the steps. Reporters leaned over railings, thrusting recorders toward Cal. He recited the plea deal basics. Evelyn agreed to pay court costs, return all assets, complete 1 year of community service, and accept 5 years probation. No spin, just the facts. Evelyn broke from her lawyer and stopped 3 feet away, the same distance she once maintained while persuading me to sign my inheritance away. Her eyes looked smaller without layers of mascara, and her voice stayed low. Loretta, Mama would want us to heal. I drew in the heavy air, tasting magnolia and old regret. Mama wanted honesty. Start there. She nodded, tears threatening, but I turned to join Cal. Closure, like a door gently shutting, slid into place behind me. Back at the Victorian, sunlight painted the freshly sanded porch rail a warm vanilla. Volunteers from the Historic Home Society had arrived with ladders and buckets, eager to undo Evelyn's gaudy granite countertops and restore proper heart pine floors. Naomi's twins chased each other through empty rooms, their sneakers squeaking on bare boards. The house breathed again, no longer staging for a sale, but a home inhaling possibility. Cal lugged a box up from the cellar. Found more of Evelyn's staging junk, he puffed, revealing rolls of faux silk drapes and a chandelier wrapped in bubble plastic. What you want done with it? I peeled a price tag, 4 digits. Auction it and seed Mama's scholarship fund, I said. Turn greed into tuition. Jackson emerged from the study, laptop tucked under his arm. Mom, I finished transferring 25% of my company's shares into a family trust under your name. His voice held no bravado, just the steady tone of a son clearing rubble. Contracts await your signature. Does that leave you with control? I asked. He smiled ruefully. Enough to build, not enough to gamble alone. We circled the dining table, makeshift boardroom to sign. Naomi documented each step for Zelma, who would file papers first thing Monday. Every stroke of my pen felt like stitching a ripped seam. As afternoon light slanted gold through the sash windows, a rumble echoed from the driveway. Bertie Shaw arrived in her rhinestone-studded scooter, oxygen tank hissing victory. She presented a housewarming gift, a brass key engraved "Roots Run Deep." Cal laughed. If I'd had that line, maybe I'd be mayor. Bertie winked. You don't need an office to grow justice. She rolled to the kitchen, offering caulk gun tips to the restoration crew like a foreman in pearls. Later, when the volunteers packed up and family drifted toward their cars, Cal and I lingered on the porch swing. Cicadas were only warming up. and the first fireflies of dusk blinked near the camellia hedge. Cal handed me a small envelope, final photographs for Zelma, Evelyn receiving her eviction from deception. "Evidence archive is closed," he said. I turned the envelope over, then tucked it into Mama's old recipe tin on the porch table. "Let it rest with her biscuits and blackberry jam," I said. Cal draped an arm along the back of the swing, careful, companionable. "What's next for Loretta May?" he asked. A soft breeze lifted the scent of freshly cut lumber. For the first time since the sheriff's knock, no deadline loomed, no courtroom waited. I thought of garden beds lying fallow too long, of the scholarship fund, of a detective who showed up at sunrise with more faith in me than I had myself. "Next," I said, pushing gently off the porch boards. "We pick paint colors, plant zinnias, and maybe teach a class on how not to sign your life away." The swing rocked, wood creaking like contented laughter, and the house behind us felt alive, its heart beating in step with ours under the wide Georgia sky. 3 weeks after Evelyn's apology, the Victorian smelled of fresh primer and sawdust-sweet promise. Contractors had stripped away her marble vanity tops, revealing scars in the heart pine boards like healed wounds. I ran my fingertips along the grooves, deciding to leave them visible. Imperfections, after all, tell the truer story. Cal arrived at sunrise with 2 large thermoses, black coffee for him, chicory for me, and a rolled blueprint. "Rosanna from Historic Society worked all night," he said, unfurling the pages across the dining table. Where Evelyn had planned an open-concept showpiece, Rosanna drew pocket doors, wainscoting, and a reading nook just wide enough for Mama's rocker. Legacy, not resale. We were still tracing lines of future crown molding when Zelma called. Her usually flinty voice sounded almost giddy. "Bank. Approved settlement transfer," she said. "Restitution wire lands Monday, full amount plus court costs." I leaned against the window frame, sunlight catching dust motes that looked for once like bits of glitter. "That funds the scholarship seed money," I breathed. Zelma chuckled. "And leaves plenty to keep your porch swing afloat." The scholarship became real that afternoon. Naomi drove over with files, her twins balancing Oreo icing on their noses while Jackson's laptop live-streamed the online endowment form. We christened it the Delaney Grant for Women Returning to College After 40. Mama never had the tuition, but she'd taught us every decimal of resilience. This fund would pay it forward. Cal snapped a photo, me, Naomi, Jackson, and the kids, in front of the half-painted mantle, then emailed it to Reverend Polk. Sunday's bulletin headline read, "Stolen Estate Becomes Community Hope." The congregation buzzed like a hive when we walked in. Nobody talked about Evelyn's crimes anymore, only about which pies to auction for the scholarship banquet, yet one thread remained loose. Terry, the notary, still faced a state hearing. She'd called twice, voice trembling, asking if I would appear on her behalf. Cal and Zelma both cautioned me. She wasn't blameless, but every night as the fan turned in my borrowed bungalow bedroom, I remembered Mama's lesson about justice and mercy sharing a fence line. So I agreed to testify, truthfully, regarding Terry's cooperation. The hearing room was small, the folding chairs squeaky. Terry sat alone until I slid beside her. When the board asked why she'd allowed a signature without verification, she confessed. Job stress, single mother panic, Evelyn's $1,000 bribe. Then I spoke. How Terry surrendered her journal, signed affidavits, attended every deposition, and wept when returning Mama's torn check. The board suspended, not revoked, her license, 1 year with mandatory ethics courses. Outside, Terry hugged me. mascara smudging my shoulder, and promised to notarize future documents by the book or not at all. Cal met me at the courthouse curb. Soft-hearted, hard-headed, he said, half scold, half admiration. Mama would be proud, I answered. He offered his arm. I took it. Back at the Victorian, we found the paint crew on ladders rolling a color called river fog across clapboard, the same pewter gray Mama had chosen for the kitchen cabinets decades ago. It felt like the house exhaled. Later that week, while returning borrowed power tools to Cal's car, I noticed a dog-eared brochure on his seat. Savannah Neighborhood Watch. Volunteer investigators needed. He shrugged when I raised an eyebrow. Old detectives never quit, they just changed precincts. I smiled. I could use a hobby myself. That night, after everyone left and crickets started their moonlit chatter, I climbed the attic ladder to search for Mama's wedding quilt. Dust billowed, but the quilt lay intact beneath a cedar chest. Tucked inside was a recipe box in a yellowed envelope addressed to my girls. The letter inside urged us to lean on each other, not against. To remember that family means repair, not ruin. Tears blurred the ink. I turned the letter over, added a note of my own about forgiveness growing in unexpected soil, then resealed it for the next generation. Downstairs, Cal was sealing the last paint can. I handed him the quilt to fold over the porch swing for the night. "Ready to plant the zinnias tomorrow?" he asked. I thought of how dirt covers seeds, the darkness they push through before blooming. "Ready," I said. "Let's turn the soil." As the porch light flicked off, I locked the door that now carried only my key, no shadows. Thunder mumbled far off, a storm rehearsing in the distance, but inside my chest, the weather felt steady. A calm front, earned the hard way. The Victorian would weather many more Georgia summers, and so would I, roots sunk deep, branches wide enough to shade anyone learning how to sign their own name in ink that couldn't be stolen. At 2:14 a.m., the landline shrilled like a drill through quiet timber. Few people call a widow at that hour unless someone's hurt or plotting to make sure she is. I fumbled in the dark. "Loretta May Delaney," I croaked. A hushed voice answered, one I half recognized. "Ms. Delaney, I think I've made the same mistake your sister did. They're forcing me to sign tomorrow. Please help." Click. Deadline. I lay staring at the ceiling, pulse banging. Whoever she was, she had known exactly whom to call, which meant our fight with Evelyn had rippled further than we guessed. Justice works like thunder, first the flash, then the long roll. By sunrise, I'd brewed chicory strong enough to wake the dead and driven to Cal's bungalow. He opened the door in socks and a Grady's bait and tackle t-shirt, eyes narrowing when he saw my face. "Trouble found our porch again?" I replayed the call. Cal's detective instincts ticked on like a generator. Female, late 40s by pitch, maybe 50s. Nervous, but not panicked enough to withhold name if she trusted you. He fired off steps. Pull phone records, triangulate towers, cross-match recent elder deed filings. We were halfway through the first digitized log when Reverend Polk rang. "Loretta, sorry to pester, but my Aunt Ida got an inheritance fast-track knock yesterday, the same notary Evelyn used. Aunt Ida remembered your story." He paused. "Can you speak to the seniors circle today? They need armor." Cal raised an eyebrow. 2 leads in 2 hours. Multiplication, not coincidence. The church fellowship hall smelled of lemon oil and folding chairs. 40 retirees waited, some clutching manila folders like life vests. I shared Mama's tale in clipped sentences, forged signatures, fast-tracked deeds, the price of trust. Cal followed with 10 red flag questions. Does the executor rush you? Are the witnesses strangers? Is the notary's journal blank? each punctuated by murmurs of recognition. Afterward, a petite woman approached, cheeks flaming. "I'm Ida," she whispered, gripping my hand. She produced a deed dated last week, my own forgeries mirrored. Same bogus LLC, same crooked witness scrawls. My stomach nodded. Behind her stood Charlotte, widowed librarian, clutching similar paperwork. Cal's phone buzzed then. County records flagged 5 elder deeds transferred to Dawnlight's sister companies in 30 days. Evelyn's scam had become a template for predators. "Looks like we've uncovered the assembly line," he muttered. We convened at my Victorian's kitchen table. Ida, Charlotte, Reverend Polk, even Bertie with her portable oxygen. Cal laid out our blueprint. File a class civil suit, request emergency injunctions, alert APS. My living room became triage. Every time the doorbell rang, another neighbor arrived with a folder. Jackson showed up, laptop whirring. He coded a simple website, stopthestamp.com, where seniors could upload suspect documents. By dusk, the database pinged 18 hits across 3 counties. But tides fight back. At midnight, headlights crept up my drive, engine idling. Cal peered through the curtain. A man snapped photos of the house sign, then screeched away. A warning, not random mischief. I refused to flinch. The next morning, we met Deputy Garcia, same officer who'd served Evelyn's papers. He assigned patrol drive-bys and suggested motion lights. Jackson installed cameras before noon. Naomi baked pies to keep nerves from chewing us dry. The Victorian buzzed like command headquarters, hope and fear operating out of the same coffee pot. That evening, an email landed from the anonymous caller. "I'm Margaret, signing away Mom's house tomorrow, 9 a.m. Brady Title Co." "Please." Cal's jaw set. "We'll be there at 8:45. He notified Zelma, who lined up a temporary restraining order. I rummaged Mama's old briefcase for courage that smelled faintly of cedar and camphor. At 8:42 a.m., we stepped into Brady Title's reception. Margaret, tall, gray-eyed, sat trembling beside her mother, Miss Pearl, who clasped a cane in confusion in equal measure. The escrow agent, clipboard ready, froze when Cal announced we carried an injunction and sheriff's backup. 10 minutes later, Deputy Garcia escorted the agent and 2 witnesses to his cruiser. Margaret sobbed into her mother's cardigan. Ms. Pearl patted her back, none the wiser, but safe. Outside, Cal exhaled. One house saved. I looked down the boulevard lined with live oaks, realizing how many porches still hid paperwork ticking like bombs. "Not one," I said. "We're just getting started." Cal smiled the way detectives do when a cold case finally breaks warm. "Then let's enlarge the map, partner." Daylight struck the courthouse dome, gleaming like a fresh notary seal. And for the first time since the sheriff's knock that upended my life, I felt not just restored, but commissioned. A fax machine near the courthouse loading dock coughed out our breakthrough just after lunch. Bank ledgers linking Dawnlight Charitable Holdings to 3 newer shells, Riverview Resources, Cypress Hearts, and Palmetto Bridges. Same officers, same timestamps, a trail so sloppy it practically begged to be followed. Cal snapped a photo of the printout and sent it to Zelma with one sentence. "The tree has more branches." Within an hour, Zelma had a judge on the phone authorizing subpoenas for every account bearing those names. And because Judge McKinnon still felt the bruise of Evelyn's fraud, she signed the order with brisk strokes that told us we wouldn't be waiting weeks. While Zelma fought on paper, I fought on porches. We spent the next 48 hours knocking on doors in heat so thick even the cicadas went quiet. Each visit followed a rhythm. Introduce ourselves, explain forged deed red flags, hand over a 1-page checklist Jackson had designed, and offer to scan any suspicious documents. Some residents blinked in disbelief. Others dragged out shoe boxes of paperwork they never quite trusted. By Friday dusk, StopTheStamp.com held 39 active cases. That number felt both crushing and galvanizing. Reverend Polk arranged an emergency town hall at the high school gym. The fire marshal capped attendance at 400, and still people spilled into the parking lot. We opened with live testimony. Margaret spoke first, voice shaky but clear, about nearly losing her mother's home. Ida followed, reading the first check Evelyn had laundered, her hand steady now that fear had shifted to anger. Reverend Polk produced a stack of notarized letters from other seniors granting us permission to act on their behalf. Then it was Cal's turn. He didn't pace or shout. He stood center court, microphone in one hand, forged deeds in the other, and explained how a predator exploits grief's paperwork. He laid out simple defenses: never sign under sedation, insist on independent witnesses, verify notary credentials. He ended not with dread, but invitation. If you think it's too late, it isn't. Bring us your paper. We'll bring you light. The gym erupted in applause that felt like a dam giving way to fresh water. Monday morning, Cal and I walked into the district attorney's office with 2 banker's boxes labeled Community Case, Elder Fraud. Inside lay copies of every forged deed, bank record, and notarized affidavit we'd collected. Ada Cooper, tall and freckled, skimmed the index sheet, then whistled. "You built us a RICO starter kit," he said. "We'll impanel a grand jury by August." I pressed a hand to the box lid. "Justice delayed is assets hidden," I reminded him. Cooper nodded. "We'll move quicker than that." Outside, the air crackled with late summer thunder. Cal held the courthouse door for me, umbrella ready though the sky hadn't yet broken. "We done?" he asked. I glanced back at the granite steps, thinking of every elder who still didn't realize their porch was in danger. Not nearly. By September, the scholarship banquet outgrew the church basement and moved to the civic center. We auctioned birdhouses, quilts, and one of Evelyn's rescued chandeliers, cleaned and rewired by Jackson. The winning bid funded 2 full tuition awards and a legal aid seed grant. Naomi read the scholarship recipients, both women over 50 returning for accounting degrees. To keep books honest, they joked to applause. Evelyn, out on bond, was court-ordered to attend as part of her service. She stood quietly at the back. No silk scarf, no entourage, taking notes for the Victim Impact Journal her probation officer required. I saw her once during dessert. She gave a small nod I returned without warmth or cruelty. Some fences never mend, but new gardens can bloom nearby. Late October delivered final restitution funds, every cent plus interest, wired into a trust Zelma established for future fraud defense clinics. Bertie insisted the first clinic be held under a white tent on my front lawn to remind crooks whose porch they tried to steal. 50 seniors showed up, documents in hand, while Cal and a team of volunteer paralegals stamped each page verified or needs review. The camellias along the walkway had begun to bud, winter color promising to arrive exactly when most folks thought the garden bare. That evening, after the last folding chair clattered closed, Cal and I sat on the porch swing sipping hot cider. The Victorians' new paint glowed silver under the moon, and fresh brass numbers 237 shone on the post. My address reclaimed, my legacy replanted. "You realize," Cal said, "this started with you signing papers you didn't read. Now you're teaching half the county how to read theirs." I let the swing drift, listening to the faint hum of neighborhood porch lights clicking on. "Mama always said the darkest soil grows the brightest blooms," I answered. "We just had to turn it." A breeze rustled the camellias, and somewhere a screen door closed with a soft clap, another neighbor safe behind their own lock and deed. Cal reached for my hand, not as a rescuer this time, but as a partner walking the same long road home. I squeezed back, grateful. The porch swing creaked, crickets sang, and the Victorian, once marked for someone else's profit, settled into night like a heart finally beating its own rhythm again. And though storms may brew beyond tomorrow's horizon, the porch light stays on, the documents stay guarded, and the doors, literal and legal, will open only for truth.